You know, in some Native American legends, a skinwalker is a person with a supernatural ability to turn into any animal that he or she desires. Haas Lors is a paranormal investigator, worldwide traveler.
I spent time in Pinon, Arizona, which is kind of the heart of the Navajo reservation. My students always joke because it's where the road ends on the reservation, quite literally, the paved road.
What would you call a skinwalker?
A skinwalker in Navajo tradition is a shapeshifter. It is a group of people who do black magic and participate in witchcraft in a negative way. The pelt of an animal can be used. It could be a wolf, a coyote, a dog, a bear, crow, owl. It just depends on, what that skinwalker wants to do and wants to be at that time. There's a whole ritual and everything that goes into it. I've read about it. I've never experienced anything that had to do with a ritual to become a skinwalker. But essentially, it's a shapeshifter.
Are they all evil?
I believe so, yes.
Are they out to hurt people?
I think that their intent is definitely to hurt people. It's always a negative intent. I had several experiences where I came in contact with skinwalkers. I almost died from it.
Oh,
and I thought, boy, this is not something that we want to be flippant about, that we want to be, naive about. I had avoided writing about it and didn't really want to write about it, but I felt I had to.
How did you almost die, Hawk?
I was living on the Navajo reservation at the time, and a dog came up the driveway. It was kind of dragging its leg, foaming at the mouth, and my two dogs were outside with me. We were right at the edge of the garage, and I told my dogs, I said, chase this dog off, and it was really queer because they both kind of just yelped and ran back toward the door, and I thought, well, that's weird. So I put the two dogs in the house, and I grabbed a 2x4. By then, the dog came into the garage, and I thought, there's a lot of kids there. I'm just going to hit this dog over the head with a 2x4, put it out of its misery, and just figure, everybody's safe. So the dog kept coming, came up about probably 3 feet away from me, and I just hit it over the head as hard as I could with a 2x4, and it just laid it out flat. It was dead. I mean, it released its bodily functions. I mean, it was completely dead. I didn't want to touch it, so I scooted a little T-shirt that I had out in the garage underneath it and pulled it outside. And it was snowing pretty hard by then outside. It was late fall, early winter. And so I pulled it outside, threw it out in the snow, and walked back inside, told my wife I'm going to take it down to the dump, and dump it. Walked back outside, no dog, no tracks, nothing.
Just gone.
Gone, completely. And, there's snow. It should have shown up. I kind of sucked back. I was really, really shocked, and I walked back in the house. I told my wife what happened, and she had a really concerned look on her face. At this point, I was still pretty naive, and so I just let it go. That evening, probably midnight, 1 o'clock, I was sick. I was so incredibly sick. Vomiting, diarrhea. I mean, I couldn't keep anything down.
Jeez.
I was just a mess. I had a grant that was due the next day. I was doing a DARE grant for Navajo PD in the school, and I was like really frantic. And the next morning, I was still real sick. The wife went to teach school, came back that evening, and I was curled in a ball on the bed, and I was barely functioning, barely alive. I mean, I just couldn't see anything, couldn't do anything, and she really grew concerned. She went to the next door neighbor, and he comes over and he goes, "Hey, you need to go to a medicine man." Being the naive white guy, I mean, I'm always the naive white guy.
And I assume there were no hospitals nearby.
No, there was nothing. And probably the nearest hospital was probably about an hour and a half away, 2 hours away in Flagstaff. I don't believe in medicine men. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I just, I don't want to go anyplace. I'm just going to lie here. I'll be fine in the morning. He and my wife and his wife and his son, they took off, went out to this medicine man in Sabadelkai, and they got there, and Garnet just looked at them, and he says, "Hey, where's Haas? What's going on here? He needs to be here." don't bring him, he will be dead in the morning. I'm still at home. How does he know?
And you feel like you're dying, right?
And I'm feeling like I'm on, all I was doing as I was praying, I was just like, I'm ready to come home because I did not want to live. I had absolutely no desire to live. So they drive about 40 minutes back, 35, 40 minutes back. Chris comes in and he says, hey, Garnet said, you need to go. You need to come see him. That's all there is to it. And he's lit a fire. He's ready for you. I know you don't really believe it, but, you're going.
Yeah.
Picks me up, he wraps me up in a Pendleton blanket, puts me in his Nissan Pathfinder in the front seat. My wife, his wife, and his little boy get into the second seat of the SUV and takes me out there. Honestly, I do not remember the trip out. They get me into the Hogan. A Hogan is a traditional Navajo dwelling. There's a fire in the middle, glowing coals, a hole in the roof, and then, so they can vent your smoke. It's like round.
So they don't pipe the smoke out. They just okay.
Just vent it. And it depends on how traditional it is. Garnet and his family, the Navajos still live in a very communal type setting, and so they have a regular house, and then they have the Hogan, which is where Garnet lives because he's a medicine man, and it's a very traditional structure for him. Now, some Navajos also live in Hogans, and they're very modernized. So we're sitting at the fire. I'm wrapped in a Pendleton. I'm shivering. Honestly, I do not remember a lot about it. I remember that Chris's little boy did not come into the Hogan, which was really unusual because he and I are real close. He's just a great little kid. And I just remember the shaman, the medicine man, started mixing things together. He got out his kit, and he starts mixing things together and starts talking to me. We go through, I've been through quite a few ceremonies on the reservation, so I knew what to do, and I followed along. And he says, okay, he's got this little thing that's in his hand that he's mixed together. And he goes, okay, put this in your mouth. And he puts it in my mouth, and he says, chew while I pray. And I'm thinking, oh, boy. And I start to chew, and I start to chew. And if anybody knows, Navajo medicine men and their prayers take forever. I'm just sitting here thinking, oh, great. It's interesting because I start foaming at the mouth, and I got foam just running down my chin. He's praying, and he's praying, and he's praying in Navajo, and he's chanting.
Are you choking at that time?
And I'm just like ready to gag. And finally, he ends his prayer. He looks up at me. I swallow, and it was like just a thunderclap. Bam. And I look around, and I'm thinking, what am I doing in this Hogan? What am I doing with Garnet? And everybody's just looking at me, and they're kind of grinning because, they're all Navajo, and I'm the white guy. I'm always the white guy in the middle, and they're just looking at me like, great. And everything was gone. And I look around, and I see Chris, and I said, Chris, where's your son? And he looks at me, and he said, he wouldn't come in because he saw the bad man follow you into the Hogan. So he didn't want to be in here with a bad man.
The bad man. Is this whatever might have possessed you or taken over or something?
Exactly. When I talked to Garnet, I asked Garnet what happened, and what he explained to me was fascinating. He said, when I hit the dog over the head, it released a powder from that dog that had created that Skinwalker, was released into my nose and my mouth, and I swallowed it. In essence, I had taken all that poison inside of me. And he says, you're going to need to stay close to the bathroom for like the next 24 hours because you will be very, very sick, but you will be fine. And if you had not come to me, he said, I guarantee you would be dead by tomorrow morning.
The Skinwalker dog obviously was not there. It disappeared. What do you think it was? Was it that evil entity that the little boy had seen?
Yes, absolutely. The one question that a lot of people have asked me is, who was it? That's the first thing I think I ask Garnet, the medicine man. I asked him, who was it? And he just looked at me and he goes, you know who it was. Yeah, I do. And he said, don't you ever, ever tell anyone who it was. That malevolent evil is going to come back to you if you name it. Well, there's several ways that you can kill a skinwalker, but one of the ways is that you confront the person and you name them and you say that they are a skinwalker, and in Navajo tradition, that person will die within 3 days if you confront that person.
Just by doing that?
Just by doing that. Now, have I ever done that? No, absolutely not.
So what did the Navajo, what did they say about skinwalkers, Hoss?
You know, I got a call a couple weeks ago from a professor at Dene College in Saley. Dene College, Dene is the name for Navajo in Navajo.
Okay.
So the LaFrinda Frank was really concerned because of the book, and she had read my book, and she was just like, you know, I really want you to stress that the most heinous, most horrible thing is witchcraft in a bad way. And Skinwalker is the culmination of, you know, the worst portion, small, little, tiny portion of Navajo culture. But she wanted me to emphasize that there's really good medicine and really positive things that come off the reservation. So when it comes to skinwalkers, that's pretty much as bad as it gets when it comes to a Navajo.
Are the skinwalkers basically, they're human until they convert, right?
Right.
And then do they come back to the human form, or are they stuck as one of these animal life forms?
No, supposedly the only way that they can be stuck is if they speak to you in their skinwalker form. Then they can never become skinwalkers again. They will convert back into humans, and they will not be allowed or able to go back and be a skinwalker.
How did they get this way, Hoss, in the first place?
This is something that you desire. And I think that...
They conjure it up.
Yeah, essentially they do conjure it up. But going back to the story that the young man told me in class that he had written out in my creative writing class, his mother was what the Navajos call a glani. It's kind of for lack of a better term, I always call it a professional alcoholic. They just have, some alcohol problems. This lady was hitchhiking from Chinle back to Pinyon, which are two different towns on the Navajo reservation. She was picked up by two men. These two men took her out to a hogan. I mean, in Neverland, which is not hard in Arizona. And they had a trap door in the hogan. They put her under the hogan for 3 days. They dried her out, brought her back up in the middle of the night. They asked her, "Do you want to become a skinwalker like us, or we will kill you?" She obviously chose, "I would like to become a skinwalker." And then they told her, the way you become a skinwalker is you have to choose one of your children, and you have to sacrifice that child here, bring that child here and sacrifice that child. And then we will teach you the rituals that will allow you to become a skinwalker. And that is what she did. And this young man, he had all kinds of guilt issues because his mother came back to their home and took his sister. And she told him, "I chose your sister because, the male in Navajo tradition, she wanted to save this young man." He was 5 or 6 years old at that time. And he would see his mother from time to time, but he knew that his mother was a skinwalker. We left the reservation. We got to Amarillo. And in J.C. Johnson's, on his website, he has these porcupine quills that had been shot at some of the guys who were researching skinwalkers. And what skinwalkers do is they'll take pieces of bone or pieces of porcupine quills, for example.
Like little needles, I guess.
Little needles. And they will shoot them at you. And they will go underneath your skin, and you won't even know that they're there. They'll fester. You'll think, how did I get this, or what is it? Or you won't even feel them or see them. But that neurotoxin or the witchcraft festers inside of you, and that's when you have to go to the medicine man to have them taken out.
Oh, my.
So I got to Amarillo, and I look at my ring finger, and there's this huge piece of bone coming out of my ring finger, and that is where I got the shards. So it was Skinwalker shards linger because they linger then they come out after you've left the Navajo reservation or you've left. I mean, skinwalkers can be any place, but that's what happened to me.
You know, the closest most of us get to Navajo skinwalkers, wolfmen, dogmen, black-eyed kids, the closest most of us get to that stuff is when we listen to or participate in Coast to Coast AM. But there are people out there who track this stuff down on their own. Crypto Four Corners is an organization that was set up by J.C. Johnson and a couple of his friends to pursue these kinds of mysteries in a hands-on manner. Seems like a lot of your research, your work, involves Native Americans.
I married into the tribe back in 1991, and that was kind of a foot in for me. And even then, you know, you still have to work to earn the trust of a lot of people. Those who still learned and knew how to do the art of the skinwalker, they were employed by others to go and do spying gigs on why does my neighbor have more sheep than I do, or why this, that, and otherwise. So typically the skinwalker was used for nefarious things after the incarceration, and it got worse and worse to this day. And 90% of what I've investigated over the years in the skinwalker genre has been something with the appearance of an upright walking wolf also. So there's some kind of extreme connection to a wolfen variety with this evil practice, whether it be skinwalkers or practicing weirs.
Tell me this, have you ever seen one of these things, a wolf on two legs or a dog man, anything like that?
We've had things that we couldn't explain. I would say I've seen, you've got a couple of different varieties. When you're first apprenticing to become a shapeshifter skinwalker, Yanaklushi, you wear the hide of the animal that you want to emulate. You know, if you're going to be a wolf, you wear the wolf hide. If you're going to be a coyote, you wear the coyote hide. If you're going to be a bear, you wear the bear hide. So we have had people in bear hides, animal hides, that type of thing.
You've found hides like that, but you've never seen one of these things yourself, as far as you know.
We've seen the people up in the hides, yeah.
You have a guy, a Navajo tracker named Darren, who's one of your principal witnesses. He had an encounter with something. Can you tell me basically what it was?
Yeah, and this is something that's come up time and time again. I think he had his encounter well over, probably 10, 11 years ago. But when this thing stood up, and it was about 8 or 9 feet tall, it was stalking his wife out in a very remote area on the reservation. And when it stood up, it was about 8 or 9 feet tall, covered in hair, and it had like ram horns that came off the side of its head, kind of like a goat man. And it was just huge, and it was very frightening. Now, he was there with a rifle, and he slung out three slugs to the chest area. It slouched over, but it was able to leave the area, and it jumped over fences and careened up a hillside. And he heard about 2 or 3 days later that some medicine man had died of a heart attack.
And he connected the two?
Sort of, kind of connect. I mean, it would be conjecture, but he found it rather strange. And we've got some other stories, too, where, somebody has shot some strange-looking weird thing, and suddenly someone is having a funeral or something of that nature. It's all open to conjecture, but
so there was
a few stories out there.
So he tells the story that there was something trying to get into the house to get at his wife and son, a creature that was on all fours, and then it stood up on 2 legs, and it was really high, and he shot 3 times into its chest, poof, and he saw the puffs coming out of the chest.
Yeah. I don't know if by association with an umbrella description, if this was a cryptid critter. That's where we have to be so careful by association. We don't know. So I am kind of putting it in the skinwalker genre.
Darren also had found a coyote skin, a ball of clothes, a torch, all in a cave, right?
Yeah, and that's what we call Skinwalker Cave. And it's interesting. We've had some experiences there. We've had a lot of experiences in the canyon. We've also had sightings of the Sasquatch, the furry people, in this cave. So quite a interesting conglomeration around this area, in one area and in one cave.
Didn't he had his bullets vanish from his gun or something? His flashlight failed in this cave? It was just all kind of...
He had a 357 Magnum, and he had a full cylinder. He made sure that, him and his buddies did some target practicing earlier that day as they were making their way through the canyon, and he made sure he had a full cylinder in case they ran into some coyotes or some type of predator or something they would need to protect themselves from. And when he went and checked, all the bullets were gone. And he didn't remember them falling out of the gun or firing the gun. They just weren't there.
Darren thinks he had a Skinwalker encounter. He thinks that's what he's dealing with here, right?
I'll take it at that. And I've had descriptions of that type of creature before with the horns that roll down the side of the head, a lot like you would see on a goat, the curved horns. Sheep squatch? I don't know. I mean, there's different descriptions that kind of match up with what he saw. But at this point, without any more evidence, just his eyewitness testimony and what's going on in that area, it is something I'll put in the Skinwalker category, some type of shape-shifting entity.
This comes up again and again in the witnesses you talk to, is the idea of jealousy or internal rivalries, or that being related to skinwalkers, meaning you've got a problem with somebody else in the tribe, you hire a skinwalker either to watch them or harass them or give them a bad time.
Or kill them. And, that happens quite regularly. They can cut your brake lines, things like that. They'll do modern mafia techniques to take you out, too. They don't have to turn into a wolf and rip your head off. They can do other things, too. And also they've got a powder, I call it the mummy powder, and, because there isn't I don't think there's a better description of it, but they can blow this powder in your face. And it depends on what kind of concoction they've come up with. But a lot of people become numb and become very open to suggestion, and that they'll follow these skinwalkers. Come with us. Come here. Come there. Or they can blow a powder in your face and completely paralyze you, and you'll be completely conscious, and you can watch them as they rip your entrails out, and you can't do a thing about it because you're paralyzed. So they do have some different potions, powders, and formulas for whatever it is they want to do. One of the interesting things that happened last summer, we were up on the Carrizo Mountains, which is near the Four Corners area, very well near there. And we'd had a camp up there for a couple of days, and we were tearing camp down, and Leonard Dan, Chief Dan, our Navajo elder, had a dart shot at him, and it just missed him, and it went into his tent material. And so he brought it over to me and showed it to me. I said, you shouldn't even be touching that. But what they'd done is they'd taken a porcupine quill, and they had filled the hollow part of it with probably some type of neurotoxin. And we don't know what it was, and it's out for it to be analyzed. But, thank God it missed him and didn't hit him. We didn't find any footprints, and we scoured the area. Nothing. A blowgun, maybe 30 yards? And some of these blowguns, I don't think you're going to get much over 30 yards with accuracy. And we scoured that area. There was no footprints in the area other than ours, so I don't know how they delivered that dart.
Dr. Travis Taylor, welcome to Coast AM.
Well, the first thing was to determine if the phenomena was real or not. But we had to decide for ourselves if we thought the phenomena was real. Well, I would say 100% now we absolutely know the phenomena is real. Might even be multiple phenomena, but we can't determine that yet. And then the next step will be to determine what the phenomena is. It's really difficult because from yourself, from being exposed to the research from the past, that it doesn't just show up every day on Tuesday at 9 a.m. so we can go set up everything and be ready for it. I mean, it happens when it happens.
Are you the guy who designs the tests and experiments? Am I correct in saying that you are, in essence, poking and prodding largely because you want to generate a response from whatever it is to see what happens?
Yeah, so Eric Bard is the full-time there, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. He is the principal investigator and was, 3 years before I got there. And he is mainly over all of the main decisions or whatever as far as the research program, but he's more of a much more of an observationalist. And so they brought me on because my expertise was in experimental physics and experimental concepts. There's some sort of time-based anomaly that's occurring on the ranch very often, whether it's something is spoofing the clocks and all the equipment or time itself is actually being confused. We can't determine yet, but there is definitely some sort of time factor in what's going on there.
it feels strangely elusive, too, doesn't it? I mean, transitory radiation, for example. I mean, you can testify personally the radiation was real because it affected you.
Yes, I had all the symptoms, classic symptoms of radiation, gamma ray radiation exposure. You know, I saw 4 different physicians. 2 of them were experts in radiation exposures, and talked to an oncologist as well afterwards. And it was real symptoms of gamma ray exposure. My gamma ray detector detected gamma ray radiation, and it also knocked out many electronic components near me when it happened. We have since put gamma ray detectors in random locations on the ranch, and some of them have had huge spikes, even more than one that I got hit with. We don't know where they're coming from. It's not even really like combat, because at least combat, you know, there's a bad guy out there that's shooting at you. And this thing, we don't know what's causing this, and it's randomly occurring. As far as we can tell, it's random. And so how do you prepare for something like that? We just measure diligently, and if we see high readings, we evacuate.
But this radiation is there 1 minute, and then it's gone.
I don't know how to explain that. You know, we've had various speculations. If I say speculation, and there are other possibilities. If there was some kind of traversable wormhole, you might have a similar effect near the mouth of it that would accelerate standard radio waves up to gamma rays or something, and it could have caused it. But that seems like it would have been a much bigger effect instead of just like a small tight beam that affected me and didn't affect guys that were 10 feet away from me.
Does it feel like there is an intelligence behind it, or more than one intelligence?
Sometimes it does. It seems like it's predicting what we're about to do, and it'll shift so that what we do is ineffective. You know, where one day we find a telltale sign, and we go with a better piece of equipment back to that same telltale sign, and now it's moved or it's changed the way it's functioning, and so we don't measure it the right way with this new piece of equipment we bring out. Or we're wanting to dig or do some demolition or move something that needs a heavy piece of equipment, and we always get brand new equipment, brand new batteries, and all that type of stuff. And it seems like every time we do that, the equipment malfunctions, the batteries die, the electronic systems in the equipment are zapped somehow.
As you know, Travis, when you tell people about equipment failures, batteries dying, those who are skeptical and don't want to believe anything is real there would say, aha, that's very convenient.
Oh, it's absolutely not coincidental. It happens so many times, it's beyond statistical variation. I mean, we have memory cards on a daily basis that the data gets scrambled or completely erased. We have the big $30,000 to $70,000 television camera systems. They that are modern technology. You know, they will just stop functioning. We have smaller, cheap cameras, you know, in the hundreds to a few $1,000s kind of range that the memory gets wiped or the cameras just shut off for no reason. Cell phone batteries, you can take it right off of the charger and say 100%, and 5 minutes later you'll look and it'll be completely dead and turned off. And we've had car batteries do that. We've had bulldozer batteries. In fact, we changed batteries on a bulldozer 3 times in one morning, and with brand new batteries. And every time we hooked it up, the batteries instantly were dead. This is something that, you know, people can say, oh, it's convenient for TV or whatever, but anytime, just ask the experts that we've brought out that are contractors that we just paid to come do a job. And when they come out, and every one of them, I don't think we've ever had one in 4 years now get there and say, oh, it's just another day at the office. No, every time they say, I've never had anything like this in the world happen to me after 25 years of doing this particular kind of job.
The part of the lore of the ranch is about digging, and I can tell you where that started. It was with the rancher who was there before Bigelow. I called him Tom Gorman in our book, but you know what his name is. And he had been told when he bought the property, hey, before you do any digging, you got to let me know. And he just thought it was odd at the time. And then he would notice when he would do any kind of digging at all, that would get a reaction. It would often get a reaction. And I know when you guys came in, you thought, oh, there is a little something to it, right?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if it's a direct causation, but there absolutely seems to be a correlation when we're digging with intent. Now, there's different kind of digging. it's a ranch. There's post holes, there's pipelines, there's cables, there's whatever you need for daily operation of living on a ranch, and that never seems to be an issue. But it's when you're digging with intent to look for something or find something or dig something up, it's directed at trying to figure out what's happening here at the ranch, as opposed to just daily operations and maintenance. There seems to be something that tries to interfere with that, and I know that sounds crazy, but statistically, we see the equipment fail. We see people have physiological reactions. Some of them have even ended up in the hospital with sudden heart issues or sudden catatonia or sudden reactions that are dangerous brain kind of hemorrhages. It's really odd, and we can't say that this causes that, but they sure do correlate with each other an awful lot beyond just being a statistical oddity. The injuries have been real. There's no question about that. Yours was, and others have as well. Yeah. That's the most shocking and bizarre thing is, to what purpose is that? What is it that, if there really is some sort of intelligence that doesn't want us to dig there, why? What's buried there that they don't want us to find? Toward the end of the last season, you guys had been drilling into the ridge, and you hit something. And I recall at a public event some weeks ago, you were openly discussing some of the results. Can you share some of that with us now? Yeah, sure. We were drilling into the mesa where we had some data suggest and some stories suggest this might be a point of interest. And we get a horizontal drill rig that's got a carbide diamond tipped bit that's hard, and it should go. The guy says it should go through granite, and they've drilled through steel reinforced concrete. And we get to a point that it won't drill through anything at about 100 feet inside the mesa. And it keeps bouncing off of it and shattering against something extremely hard. He said he's never felt anything like it. And the track that it takes to sort of a semicircle underneath it, like it's we kind of described it when we looked at it. If you had the bottom edge of a plate turned up sideways, you take a dinner plate and turn it up sideways, the drill bit tracked out a path, kind of like the body was hitting the bottom of that and being pushed around it. And these pieces of metal came out, lots of it. We had many gallon Ziploc bags filled with this stuff, and we took it to the University of Utah to have them do mass spectrometry, X-ray, elemental analysis, scanning electron microscopy, all the different things we could test it. And the materials came back. They were not anything natural. The scientists there at University of Utah said that it was absolutely a manufactured material. And the odd thing is that it was some weird elements. On one side, it was almost pure tellurium. In the middle was a 50-50 almost mix of iron and aluminum, which is something we don't mix. And then on the other side was almost pure europium. And I find that really odd that you've got these kinds of materials that are semiconductor and possibly superconducting in certain situation materials around a conductor material. That to what end, and how did it get in that dadgum mesa 100 feet in? It makes no sense. Is europium something that's found in the basin, as far as you know? No, europium and tellurium both are, they're abundant in asteroids, and we mine them because we use them in tellurium we use in solar cells and other microelectronics, and europium, it has certain properties that we use in certain types of microelectronics, and they're not rare, but they're not everywhere either. And there's not, to my knowledge, there aren't any big tellurium or europium mines in Utah. and yeah, that's the weird thing. But why it's manufactured though? It's a thin layer coated on one side of this metal substrate, a thin layer on the other side. And that, by the way, it brings up something, George. I have to correct you. This is not the first time I've ever been on Coast to Coast, back in the 90s, I was on Coast to Coast with Art Bell because I was a scientist that was investigating Art's parts for Linda Howe.
Ah, wow.
And one of the first scientists to study the layered materials on that. And what's really interesting is these materials, while they're different elements that we've pulled out of the Mesa on the Ranch, they look very similar.
In terms of the layering, then?
Yes, in terms of the layering, like Art's parts, yeah.
Is it, I mean, you know, where this is leading, the suggestion that there's some kind of a manufactured object, maybe an advanced object that's stuck in that mesa?
Yeah, that's where, that's what at least the current limited evidence we have would suggest. And I'll tell you, we got a lot more evidence last summer, and we did do some more drilling. But other than that, I can't spoil it for you. But I will tell you what we find is very exciting.
Toward the end of last season, I recall seeing you come up with a pretty interesting theory about maybe there's a connection to asteroid or meteor impacts that maybe that could explain the distribution of some of these materials, that there are other places around the globe that where there's been additional reports of strange activity that were, in fact, asteroid or meteor impact sites. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I did a study on meteorite, asteroid or comet impacts, whatever, impact sites around the globe over the last, 100 million years or something like that. And really interesting is there are a lot of sites where there were religious stories took place there, or there were other sites where there were UFO sightings often. There were strange things that had happened there, and it looks like the Uinta Basin was created there was an impact there of some like 50 or 60 million years ago or something. But the question is that just correlation? Is it just, coincidence? I'm not a real big fan of coincidences, but what is it that crashed there? Maybe it was something that crashed there, and then that was of interest, and somebody else came to look and see what it was. Maybe they wanted it, and then maybe they left something behind that causes some of these strange phenomena, or maybe they're actively looking at it now, and that's why some people see UFOs going in and out of mountains and things like that. That's all speculation, of course, but we've got a lot of anecdotal evidence and now a lot of real hard scientific evidence that there's some kind of phenomena taking place at a lot of these kinds of locations.
As you know, UFO reports, UAP reports, is what drew Bigelow and his team there with NIDS in the first place, what attracted OSAP and the DIA. It's a primary interest of yours as well. I remember the first time I got to interview you, you told me you'd never seen a UAP until you got to the ranch, and now you've seen a heck of a bunch of them, haven't you?
Yes, I have. In fact, that is exactly right. I'd never seen a UFO or a UAP of any form, not even ball lightning. I mean, I'd seen thunderstorms with lightning and plasma balls in a lab, but nothing that you would call a UAP, even if it was a natural phenomenon that fit in that category. Certainly no nuts and bolts UFO type things. And when I got to the ranch within a couple of weeks of being there, we saw without a doubt this translucent sphere appear in the sky over the ranch. It just appear for probably 2 or 3 minutes and then just vanish without moving. And then we've seen many more. We've seen black amorphous UAP over a cow as it died. Seen them flying over the mesa. We've seen them. We've captured video in infrared. We've captured microwave signals when they occur. We've even seen some changes in the entire radio spectrum when some of these things occur. So it's real scientific evidence that something is occurring.
What are they?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What are they? That's the big question. What are they? Are they craft with beings in it? Are they, spy portals from some other realm or distant location? Are they something new that Mother Nature's cooked up that we don't understand yet? Are they some magic technology that our near peers like Russia or China has come up with? Honestly, I think the last one is the most ridiculous one because the physics that some of these things are doing would suggest that these other countries had spent billions and billions of dollars in a Manhattan Project level effort, and we don't see evidence of that.
As far as we know, what you've seen, drones and balloons do not explain what's been recorded on camera.
I challenge most people to keep drones flying in the air over Skinwalker Ranch because almost every time we bring drones out, we have many malfunctions. The batteries run dead. A lot of times, GPS doesn't function on the ranch like it does anywhere else, and the drones think they're completely different places. And they'll crash because they think they've already landed and turn off at 50 feet in the air, or they won't take off because they think they're 100 feet below the surface. It's just the strangest things like that. And so, it's not balloons or drones that we're seeing out there. Absolutely not.
I've seen enough of the shows to know that you got a lot of rocket power on that ranch. Could you shoot one down, or is that giving something away?
Well, I don't want to go into so. As we've said, these things are random as it appears. We can't predict when they're going to be. So what do you think the odds would be of us actually being able to hit one with a rocket? And that's really not why we're launching the rockets. The rockets are a test of we send up sensors to get them to certain altitudes and see what happens as the instruments come back down themselves, because they follow physics of aerospace engineering that we understand very well. And the rockets will, over the triangle area, for example, they statistically avoid a certain region in the sky, even if it's doing the opposite of what the aerodynamics would have the rocket do. And that's one of the tests that we've really, you'll see we went way out of our way to verify that this last summer. And there is absolutely something over the triangle that is anomalous and unusual.
I am a non-scientist, so just from my uninformed opinion, all these rocket tests that you've done, it's almost like you're trying to outline the boundaries or outer limits of something that's up there, that's always there. Is that going too far?
Exactly right. Yes, that's exactly right. So imagine you had a target that was an invisible target out in your yard, and you could put a dartboard behind it, and you just keep throwing darts, and then you look at the board later and you realize there's a hole in the middle of where the darts should have landed on their target, then there was something in the way that was making the darts move around it or miss it. And that's kind of what we're doing, and trying to get enough of them thrown up there that we can get a statistical picture of what we're looking at.
Is anyone else watching you? I know I've asked this of Brandon Fugel, the owner of the ranch, a few times, whether or not there's government surveillance of what you're doing. Is there anybody speaking with a Russian accent or Chinese who's on the periphery watching what you're up to?
Well, George, I really I don't want to talk about that and speculate, because if they are, then and we knew it, then it would be giving it away. But if they are and we don't know it, then it would be a pure guess. But I will tell you that we have, and we showed this on the show either last year or the year before that we detected that something was recording our conversations and rebroadcasting the conversations on different frequencies that we were not doing. And so that something is listening and watching, whether it is one of our near peers or some private citizens or something else. But the technology that we detected didn't appear to be any technology that we understood. It didn't look like just a standard, listening device, a bug or something retransmitting. It was something completely different. And that was really odd, and it's happened more than once. When I was a senior in high school in 1985 to 86, I won the Alabama State Science Paper Competition. I built a radio telescope in my backyard that picked up radio waves from black holes and supernovas and things like that. And the first prize of the thing was a summer job with the U.S. Army in a directed energy weapons lab, and so I worked there for that summer with the Army, and they liked my work enough that they offered me a job. They said they'd pay my way through school if I would work a quarter and then go to school a quarter. It's called the Cooperative Education Program back then, and they paid my way through school, paid all my books and all that stuff, and I worked for them ever since. I worked the first round up until I got my first master's and then my first PhD, and got a job opportunity outside of the government at that point to go and do some other space and intelligence community work. And so I went outside the government for 8 years. And then in 2007, I got an offer from the government to come back that I couldn't refuse. And thank goodness I did, because I went back to work there with the U.S. Army Space and Missile Defense Command. And through that interaction, I met and with the Skinwalker Ranch interactions, I met the director of the UAP Taskforce and got chosen to work on that work. So it all kind of led to one thing led to another, I guess.
All high school kids, I guess, get to work on, direct energy weapons labs. That's pretty standard for the course, right? So you did work on classified programs, sensitive stuff along the way.
Oh, yeah, since I was a teenager, really, I've done that, I guess I've got about 35 years of experience, and had a security clearance about longer in my life than I didn't have one.
I don't know how you had time to get all these degrees. Are you getting more, or are you done?
No, I'm actually working on a third PhD right now I'm working on a sort of a new idea program with the local university here, University of Alabama, Huntsville, in the physics department, that while it's not just going to come right out and say it's the things you'd need to understand UAP physics, it's basically a physics area of concentration that would be the things you would need to understand UAP physics.
I was absolutely astonished when Radiance Technologies put out that release about hiring you. They're based in your hometown. They're a major defense contractor with offices in 17 states. They do really great work, a highly regarded company both by the employees and by the government. And they had hired, and they don't shy away from mentioning your interest in the UFOs or Skinwalker Ranch, and they did the same thing with a guy named Jay Stratton, who was the head of the UAP Taskforce, who worked on other programs, UAP related, and then you guys worked together there at Radiance. What are you up to?
Well, I mean, we're working for a company, a high technology company that the job is to find great work to do that will make the company money, and of course our expertise has been in government research, intelligence community research, that sort of thing, and that's what we're applying it to. And of course, it is a company that's made a big business out of reverse engineering or foreign materials exploitation, FME as it's called, foreign materials assessment, FMA, and that means if we had a Russian doohickey or a Chinese doohickey or some other foreign equipment, we reverse engineer how it works and try to understand it and see if the knowledge could help us, in future situations. So if there were other technologies to reverse engineer, I think we'd be the perfect place to do that.
Yeah, something really foreign. So I jokingly asked your company president. I met him last June, and that's when you and I saw each other down there in Huntsville. And I asked him, "Well, are you guys taking apart some UFOs, or would you go after a contract like that?" He didn't blink. He said, "Oh yeah, sure we would."
Yeah, well, I mean, again, if we had a customer that wanted us to help them with something like that, that's it'd be absolutely right up our alley. I mean, we understand how to reverse engineer at least technology that we can find here on Earth in various situations. So if we were to find something, I think it would be it'd certainly be a worthful endeavor, and it would be an exciting research project. That's for sure.
Tell me about being asked to work on the UAP Task Force by Jay Stratton. He created it, in essence. He put it all together. Was it in part because of the work you're doing, the investigation on Skinwalker, that you came to his attention, or did he know about you otherwise?
Well, apparently he knew about me, but I didn't know about him. The first year I was out at Skinwalker Ranch, the first few weeks, I detected some signals that made me nervous that it was potentially some bad guys doing some bad things. So I went and reported it to security, and kept going up the chain. And then I got a call. Some folks said, "Hey, we need to go brief this office in the Pentagon." And so I went and briefed the office in the Pentagon, and there was a guy there that came in, and after we were done, he asked everybody else to leave, and he had a copy of my book that I wrote, Alien Invasion, which was a serious study on what we would do from a military and intelligence community standpoint, and even a civil standpoint, if we were invaded by aliens. And that's pretty bleak, but and what we should be doing to prepare. But anyway, he said, "Hey, I'm Jay Stratton. I'm the director of the UAP Taskforce, and here's what we're doing, and we appreciate the brief, and would you like to come help us solve the problem, work on this problem?" I was like, "Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've been wanting to do that, my whole life. This is a dream come true."
The report that came out of the UAP Task Force, it's mandated by Congress towards the end of the year. And then, right at the time when the really hardcore work on that report gets underway, Jay Stratton, who'd headed the task force, gets yanked out of there for whatever reason. You guys put together a report. I thought it was terrific. I mean, it's broad strokes. You got a lot of numbers in there, not specifics about the cases, but you can read between the lines. And I think Congress did, and the public did to a large degree. The UAP public, that's another matter altogether. Can you talk in general, without violating any kind of laws or confidentiality statutes, about what you saw while working there? What kinds of evidence exists that the public has not seen? Was it persuasive to you that this is legit?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you is that we had a lot of data from a lot of different sources, but we were only studying data taken from credible military sources. We did talk to the FAA about some commercial things and to NASA about some of their civil things, but we had better, pristine chain of custody data from fighter planes, military assets, and so on, military equipment. And so we stuck mostly to that because we knew where the data came from, and we could track it, and we could then investigate what it meant. And we had many. I mean, we talk about 144 cases specifically in the report, and only one of them turned out that we could prove turned out to be a balloon. The rest of them, there was not enough data to say that it was this thing or that thing. And there was a lot of data that suggested it was much more than some things that people want to, debunk or throw away. But we can't talk about some of the data because it was taken with classified instruments, of course. And so that's why, a lot of people can go after and say, well, what did they do? They had all this time, and they just this is the best they could do, is this 9-page report or whatever it was. Well, the report has there was a lot more to it than that, but that's not what got released to the public, and for good reason. I mean, think about it. If an F-35 is capturing something with any instrument on it, heck, everything on F-35, even I think the color of the paint's classified. So, I mean, you can see it became a difficult thing having every piece of data was at a different kind of classification even. So we couldn't even stick all the data together and do like a data trend analysis across data sets. It was a difficult task to do in 1 year.
The UFO public will never be happy with whatever comes out. They're always going to be griping about something. They don't like the images that have been released. It's all grainy. There's got to be something better. Obviously, there are no IMAX movie cameras on F-18s. They do have thermal imaging systems. That's some of the images that the public has now seen from pretty famous cases. Can you say anything about other images that you may have had access to without giving away the store? Is there better stuff that we haven't seen that maybe Congress or somebody else has seen?
Well, I can't really say specifics, but what I can say is we had 144 cases we studied that were taken from military systems. And, I think, 3 have been released from 3 videos or so have been released from the public. So I guess you can infer from that whatever you want to infer. But, of course, there's more data out there.
You've seen the work of the debunkers. The East Coast incidents have been described as they must be balloons and drones. The West Coast warship, the 10 warships that were buzzed by 100 objects in July 2019. You've seen the debunking attempts there. You would consider both of those places, the cases that came out of those, as still genuine unknowns?
Yeah, absolutely. They were certainly genuine unknowns. And then I've just decided that I'm not even going to listen to the debunkers or even talk about them, because they don't have all the data. They didn't get to see all the data, and it wouldn't matter. Like you said, the UFO could land on their doorstep, and they would debunk it away as swamp gas reflecting light from Venus. It doesn't really matter. My dad always tells me the Benjamin Franklin statement of a man convinced against his will is that another opinion still. So you're not going to change their mind, and I'm not in it. What I'm in it for is study the science and release the information. Get the information into the scientific community for peer review, for discussion, for the general public to get to review as best they can, as best I can. And that's kind of what the secret of Skinwalker Ranch is. We're reporting our work in pretty much very real time, open to everybody. So it's something that people are just going to have to learn, that it's going to take some time for us to figure this out.
Are you encouraged by the interest of Congress? There's a hearing coming up this week. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who was down there in Huntsville for at least a while. I don't know if you know him or not, but are you encouraged, and do you think that congressional interest will actually go somewhere?
Well, I certainly hope it will, and I hope it has enough pull and push in both directions, that it forces that the money gets appropriated, the funds get expended in appropriate places, and not just in places so that everything kind of goes away quietly, nobody ever discovers anything, and it just dies a quiet death and people forget about it. I think the general public is done with, the many hundreds of programs that are all of them that come out and say, oh, there's nothing to see here, there's nothing to see here, when we know you can't hide it from the general public anymore, because anybody can buy scientific equipment at such a low cost and measure things for themselves. I'm encouraged, yes.
Senator Gillibrand, who's heading this committee that's having the hearing this week, she seemed pretty ticked off that the Pentagon had found a way to not fully fund Arrow, that they've been sort of dragging their feet. We know the Air Force has been sort of reluctant to come to the table. So I think we're all hopeful that they're called on the carpet and maybe can get it fully funded, and they can get on with it. But you bring up an interesting point. Private citizens, private groups can do a heck of a lot of this work on their own. Private companies like Radiance, for example, right?
Sure. The work at Skinwalker Ranch is all privately funded. So, and I'd say we've got as much public data as anybody's collected with real hard scientific instruments. And I'm not saying other people haven't, but I'm just saying we've got at least as much as anybody else has done, if not more. And it's doable. Now, it can get expensive, but there are a lot of people out there with deep pockets. If they really want to know the answer to this, somebody's going to have to step up and just do it, because I'm not so sure that the government infrastructure is actually is designed in a way that they can tell everything that they discover just from national security reasons. And people are just going to have to accept that, and we're going to have to figure out how, as a culture and society, to get to the answer ourselves without expecting the government to take care of everything for us and just say, here it is, we're going to spoon feed you the answer. I think we're going to have to do the hard work ourselves.
You would say that the public is ready for whatever it is. I guess, it's a tough question to answer because we don't know what the answer is. We don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, I would say that, the public is at least capable of handling handling it. You know, there are all the reports and studies that suggest, oh, well, the stock exchange will go crazy. People will freak out and won't go to work. You know, I kind of have a different view on that. I think certainly even if it turned out to be, and I'm being, you know, facetious on this a little bit, but if it turned out to be there's going to be a war between angels and demons, I want to know about it so I can at least be prepared somewhat. You know, is there something I can do to be prepared? I don't know. Civil defense, you know, if a tornado's coming, I want to know that it's coming, and I want to go get in a storm shelter.
Dr. Travis Taylor, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, George. Thank you very much.